Let's roll, bro.
All right. And welcome to this edition of the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast. I have Jules from the Giants Brawl podcast on. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff today because we have a lot in common. We're both Giant fans, we're both Yankee fans, and that's what this podcast covers. So, Jules, how you doing? I know you said before we got together on Zoom that you saw a little bit of Giants Twitter or saw Twitter in general. That's one of the topics we're actually going to talk about today, and I'm going to rant a little bit. But how are you and what's your feeling on Giants Twitter lately if you've seen it?
Uh, Listen, first of all, Alex, thanks for having me on, man. It's a pleasure. I always love branching out and getting the Giants brawl message out there. But in addition to that, listen, Giants Twitter is always we always kind of clown on it because it gets a little crazy, right? I mean, that Twitter could go from one extreme to the next. I mean, listen, there was shit about Saquon Barkley that I know I was reading. How they were bashing him, and I forget what the name when they were coming like say Naquan or something like that, or we made a mistake, Quad. I don't know. They come up with all these stupid little phrases to try to say like how bad of a pick this was in 2018 now, just because of one major injury and then he had that small injury about 2 seasons ago. So it does get a little ridiculous to say the least.
Yeah, and I've asked other fan bases if they've had this type of confrontational stuff on Twitter, and they said no, we don't. My brother's a Jets fan, oddly enough, and he said we don't fight with YouTubers. The content creators don't fight based on this, that, and the other thing. And I want to go on to Giants Twitter a little bit. Obviously, you marked on the Saquon Barkley sort of discussion, and yesterday, I believe there was a Leonard Williams discussion of whether we should resign him at $20 million, what he wants and how much of a playmaker or contributor he is to Patrick Graham's defense. And I want to say this. So I usually don't call out people on my podcast a lot, but I'm going to do it now because this guy, he's been all over Twitter. Jules, you probably know who this is. I know you guys call a lot of people out on Twitter, and I like seeing that, to be honest, because there's not a lot of guys who are willing to stick up for their fans and stick up for, Dave Gettleman and whatnot. But there's this one guy, his name is Will. And he, for the past how many years, has been complaining about Dave Gettleman. Day in, day out, his username is some miscalculations in 2018. And I'm all fine and well with people saying the facts about Dave Gettleman, the 2018 stuff and what he did wrong. I understand that. But, it's really annoying to see that a lot of people are muting him because he's constantly bitching and moaning every day. And it's not just that. There's one comment he made, which is extremely harsh, A, and B, I don't know what type of piece of trash you are. You're going to say this about anybody at all. So he says, I hope that something comes up where Dave Gettleman is involved in a sexual harassment or sexual something scandal. And I'm like, what piece of trash comes up with that shit? I'm not all for ranting and cursing, but you know what? You have to be the biggest lowlife on Giants Twitter to come out with something like that. And this guy's got like 1,000 followers. Like, I get it. He might be trolling or something, but how do you listen to that and then keep following him and co-signing that? You could hate Gettleman and you could not like the guy, but why would you, just go to that lowest extent of life because you're sitting here and complaining about something that happened 2 years ago? I mean, what do you think about that? I don't know if you saw. I think you know who he is.
I've definitely seen the handle a few times for sure. And I know he's definitely had some stupid comments. I mean, this one I definitely missed. I don't even know how you would even like get that ridiculous and try to like wish something bad on someone. That's just like retarded. I have no patience for that. But you're right though. I mean, when it comes to Giants, bro, one of the things we kind of pride ourselves in is we love going after things like that. Now that I heard this, he might be getting a tweet later on tonight from us, or myself directly because I really don't care. But yeah, we've even had people on the show where we want to bring them on just to debate the issue, right? We love getting into it with that kind of stuff because you constantly hear about Dave Gettleman and how he's messed up picks and he should have done this and he should have done that. Well, will we be happy with having Sam Darnold as our quarterback currently? Because that's kind of where we were going to go in 2018 had we not taken Barkley, right? And yet we still constantly hear these things. And, one thing that I'm going to actually mention on our pod tomorrow, we usually go live. We usually go Tuesday nights to come out on Wednesday morning. But basically what I'm going to say is with Dak not being signed, and when it's being traded from the Eagles, doesn't that make Daniel Jones the best quarterback in the NFC East currently, without any kind of argument? I mean,
it does.
What are you going to say? Jalen Hurts is the best quarterback? No shot, man. Yeah. I mean, and whatever the hell's going on in Washington, I mean, all they keep crying is if they got a quarterback, they'd win the Super Bowl. So I mean,
Yeah.
you gotta hear that nonsense. So I mean, I just kind of put a little light into it because look, say what you want about Gettleman. The majority of the guys that are on with me are huge supporters of Dave Gettleman. I'm the one that always has to kind of take the opposite side to it a little bit, just because I'm sort of on the fence. He's made some really good moves, and then he's made some questionable moves. And let's just face it. I mean, that's usually what happens with most GMs, right? You're never going to find a guy that's going to make every move and everything's going to work out perfectly. It just doesn't work like that. It's human error. There's mistakes. There's, guys like DeAndre Baker that we just didn't think would amount to what he did. And now he ended up with Kansas City. It's just a mess with that guy. So there was a few, little errors here and there. And when you look back on it, you'll sit there and you'll say, okay, fine. We didn't take the quarterback in 18, but then we did in 19. Who else besides Daniel Jones would you have taken in that 19 draft? There was no other quarterback that stepped up or emerged. I mean, you had guys like Gardner Minshew and a few other names like that, but they were more reaches than anything else. And look, you know what? We keep talking about it. And I know we're going to get into it a little bit later on too, is just that if we surround Daniel Jones with some actual offensive weapons, right, and we get back Barkley 100% healthy, I think this kid's going to do something. He might not be the next great quarterback, but he can be more serviceable than people think.
I definitely agree with you there. And I was actually doing an article or similar something on it. You got to surround him with weapons to get, the best out of him, especially when you talk about, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard. People crap on Slayton for the year he had, and he didn't have a good year, but also at the same time, he's good fifth round value talent. You don't find stuff like that in the fifth round often. As well, going back to the Twitter argument, there's a lot of, content creators out there, most from what I've seen, that, are on the fence with Gettleman, but won't push, won't complain about him. That's sort of I would say, morale right now with Dave Gettleman. But you take a look at some other content creators, they'll, bash him and trash him and complain about him and whatnot. See, my problem is, and I as I said, I really don't like ripping the fans, but there's another certain guy on Twitter that will go out, I'll mention his name, repeat what Mike Too Nice says. And this is not a rip against Mike Too Nice. He has his own content. But there's this one guy who goes out there, repeats what Mike Too Nice says, and then comes back to really bash up the fan base on Twitter and doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Like one of the other day, I was talking with another content creator on Twitter DMs, and the guy on Twitter says, "Thank you, Joe Judge, for the 2020 draft." I'm sorry, the Giants really let Joe Judge draft all these guys? The first-year coach that was in a Belichick kind of scheme and other coaches work from there? I mean, you have to actually think to some of this crap, and it might be trolling or whatnot, but some people are just really two-faced in certain situations. Because the same guy, he trolls on Twitter, and he also tells fans to go fuck themselves if they support Dave Gettleman. Because if you say something like Dave Gettleman, he made a good move on this, you're supporting him. But it's not the same way if you're not supporting him or whatever. But this certain guy, he actually has made 2 videos on YouTube. He's got like 9 subscribers. Then no wonder his channel hasn't gone anywhere. And, he made like a Washington football team record prediction. This guy called him the R word. But nonetheless, he's a totally different guy when he goes on people's channels. He was debating this. One content creator says, "You know what? I'll go on your call-in show." Yeah, he wasn't going to do that, but my point is about this certain guy is that he'll say all this mean, bullshitty stuff about the Giants on Twitter, but when he goes to YouTubers, I think it was yesterday, he was on Diggy's channel, Diggy546, I think his name is, and we were doing a mock draft, and he was sending super chat after super chat with relevant questions. So what is it? When you're on a live stream, you don't want to be recognized as the a-hole of the conversation, but when you're on Twitter, nobody cares? I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, the way some of these people act.
It is true. I swear. I think people like create different personalities when they're on Twitter, right? Whenever you go on YouTube, oh man, that's my face. You're going to actually see me. So you're going to see the words actually leave my mouth rather than somebody typing on my profile page, right? Or sending out a tweet. And, I think a lot of times they'll just kind of get like, I hate to use the word more ballsy, but all of a sudden they're more like Twitter tough guys. Like we would call them out. That's why, I'm glad you mentioned that early, because we are always quick to call people out on that kind of nonsense. I love getting into it with different debates on like, who's good, who's bad, who's this. like I said, and I think you nailed it too with the whole point of most of the guys kind of being sort of on the fence with Gettleman. That's me. It totally is. Like like I said, I think. Look, I want to see what he does in this draft. I'm looking forward to it. I had friends of mine that were calling me up saying to me, like, he's like, man, you better say on a podcast they need to fire Gettleman. But what's he done? Look at this guy. He's a boss. Andrew Thomas, blah, 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 going on and on and on. And yet at the end of the day, I'm like, yes, but he still did these moves, that move. Like, give the guy one more year. I mean, you got a whole new coaching regime that just came in last year or this past season, right? You had guys that were hurt. You have a young quarterback that's still developing, which, obviously, look, his biggest knock was to get the turnovers down. He gets the turnovers down, but now the offensive production's down with it. So now everybody's complaining about it, right? With Daniel Jones, right? So there's all that kind of shit that goes on. But when it comes to Twitter, man, it's funny. You did mention that where you said earlier that the Giants Twitter fan base, it's like we need someone to kind of fuck with, and we get bored almost, right? And we get to the point where it's like we got to almost start turning on each other to get heated debates over whether or not Gettleman's good, whether or not Barkley was the right pick, who would take it at 11, do we sign this guy, do we cut this guy? And I think that's just like the whole New York fan base where like literally, used to hear for years and years and years growing up how we were the best fans, but also the craziest fans, the most knowledgeable fans. And now since you have all this social media outlet, it's so simple and easy to just, oh, there was something said about this guy. You know what? I don't agree with that. And then say something out, right? And then all of a sudden you're in this Twitter war over crazy shit. And you're not even realizing half the stuff that's coming out of your mouth because you're just like flying off texting things on your phone, right? And that's what I think happens a lot of times. It gets a little too out of hand because I know I myself may have gotten a little crazy on that Sunday night game when they were pulling starters out at Washington against the Eagles when some Eagles fans were chirping on Twitter. Yeah. I mean, I definitely got myself in a few situations where I was like, look, man, if we were in the stadium right now, this would be a different conversation. So we need to stop.
It would end differently.
So that's what I find a lot with that kind of shit, man. A lot of it to me is just fun. Like I as long as like I don't care what you say, as long as it's nothing too insulting, right? Or something retarded, like you mentioned earlier, where it's like, oh, I hope this guy gets a sex scandal like Harvey Weinstein, so his life could be ruined. Like, oh, you're not saying something stupid and unintelligent. I'm all down, man. You could curse, you could say whatever, you could make fun of me. I don't care, right? I love that kind of shit. I eat off of that. But at the end of the day, to me, it's all fun and games. I never take that shit personally. So if I ever come out, people just understand that I'm just trying to like debate and have some fun with it. But that's just me.
Going back to obviously you mentioned about the New York media, and it's a good point to bring up. Obviously, with everyone trying to be their own person, everyone trying to be their own site. There's different sites, of course, where it's beat media, and it's also guys trying to be, the beat media, or at least trying to make their own content, which is really, I've noticed since becoming a content creator, is that there's more clickbait out there.
Yeah.
Whether it's the beat media, whether it's people trying to be somebody else, and they'll get you off. They'll suck up the fans, unfortunately, on the topics of Deshaun Watson and JJ Watt. They will suck them up. They will go in there, say, should the Giants land this guy? Fans will read it. They say, oh, this is not too interesting. Well, too bad. You already clicked on it. That's the unfortunate part, and people don't see to realize that. And the other day, I saw this article. Should the Giants come out and sign not Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Jackson? I'm like, this guy's like how many years old? He's cut from Philly. He's, his NFL life is behind him now. His best thing to do is retire, and we're considering him as an option because it's clickbait. I mean, some people just have to read between the lines here. And going back to the beat media, people, unfortunately, it's kind of like the same subject about people getting sucked in. Some of these guys, and you probably know who the guy is, I'm probably going to reference him in about a minute. Some of these guys just make clickbait content that fans don't see and read through the lines. They don't care about the fans. They care about the clicks. They care about the money. And, we saw all through the Deshaun Watson thing. Should the Giants trade for? And people are telling me why we should. And that guy I'm going to reference is Chris Carlin, if you know who that is, off 98.7 ESPN. And he also came up with another clickbait. It wasn't an article, it was a video. Why the Jets should keep Sam Darnold. I mean, some people just really have to read through the lines here. And the thing about beat media people, I learned this from another fan base, and it's a good point. These beat media writers, I will give them credit with their sources and, the things they report. They never really get it wrong to an extent, but they have zero personality. They work for NJ.com and all these other sites. Meanwhile, the Giants YouTubers, some of them not recognized, they don't work for anybody. They work for themselves. They put out their own content and they work very hard at that. Especially when Jordan Ranan said, "Oh, the Giants content creators steal." We don't steal. You could look at the Instagram guys for that, the ones who have to make fan pages and buy followers. So don't, really start accusing us of that. But have you heard, what do you think of the clickbait articles and just that generic topic?
Listen, yeah, it's so funny you mentioned that, right? We I would think, oh my God, it was probably like during the playoffs where we had like I would say at least a half hour, 40-minute segment of how we were going crazy about clickbait. I mean, that shit is like out of control. If there's one thing, like you want to talk about the Twitter like content and people just kind of going at it with one another, clickbait is the worst because you see professionals or quote unquote professionals with this type of stuff that's been doing this for the major companies, right? The ESPNs, the CBSs, all that kind of nonsense. And they do it themselves. Like this time I'm sitting there and I'm looking at some of these guys and I'm like, wait a minute, you've been in the business for 20, 30 years, some of them. And literally you're still putting out stupid things like clickbait. I mean, dude, it's outrageous. And I get it. Look, you're right. They don't really care about the content. Some, I would say some don't, right? They don't really care about the content. They just want to get notoriety. They just want to get clicked on. They just want to have people following them and having all this kind of, just nonsense that's put out there. Other times I think it's too, you get these guys that think they're just too smart almost. So they want to come up with some crazy idea and thought and be like, oh, this makes sense. So that if the Giants go ahead and do it, boom, I told you about it. See, I said that shit. That's why I was talking about it on my thing about 3 months ago, right? So they could just reference it. So a lot of times I think they do with the like the expression is, you just take a thing, you throw it against the wall, and whatever sticks to the wall, bang, that's what I had. So it's like that's throw out like 6 or 7 of these stupid things throughout the whole off season because there's not a whole lot of content to cover, especially on some of the down months. And then all of a sudden they'll just be like, oh, you see, look at my article back in January 8th. I said that was going to happen. Boom, look at it happen. You see, follow me. I know what I'm talking about. It just gets ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like it's just some stupidity. There's no logic behind it. I know we're definitely going to cover this in the game, but I'm just going to kind of preview it. I know I've been getting a lot of flack when I say that I would hate to take Jalen Waddle as the 11th pick, but I at least give multiple reasons behind it. I don't just sit there and be like, I don't like the guy. I'd rather have this guy. Yeah, sure. I wish Trevor Lawrence would fall to 11. We take him, right? I mean, like, but I'm talking realistic of what guys will be there and why I don't know if these guys would fit into the system properly. So, I've definitely done some things like that, and I told you I had one thrown around where we were messing around where we were saying, is Daniel Jones currently the best NFC East quarterback right now? He is kind of right, but I get what people can say, oh, that's clickbait. Maybe, but not really. It's more
creative than some of these, basically, you're going to have a lot this offseason. And one topic might be relevant as far as backup quarterbacks go, but any trade rumor that's out there, you're going to get, oh, Zach Ertz, Deshaun Watson, JJ Watt, should they come to the Giants? I mean, some of these people just have to wake up and recognize that these people just doing it for clicks. And some, again, beat reporters are good at their job, but the clickbait content, and some of these guys are really, for lack of better words, and, I don't want to use this word, scumbags. You look at MLB, there was a story 2 weeks ago, and Craig Carton exposed it on WFAN. Jeff Passan apparently knew about the Jared Porter situation 2 weeks before it happened, said nothing. I mean, how could you even do that? Nonetheless, I get it. A woman was sexually assaulted or whatever happened. I think it was sexually harassed. But nonetheless, about this. You claim to be a guy who breaks news. You claim to be a respected scumbag. But now you're going to go out there and just try to prove your point and try to make yourself great again. And what really pissed me off is these beat writers for the Giants. After Ryan Connolly was cut during the preseason, whatever, training camp, whatever, everyone was going out there saying, look, this is a bad move for the Giants, keeping Devontae Downs a special teamer, take Crowder, and again, we didn't know what the season was going to bring. Preseason games not happening was the biggest screw up the NFL did this year. I'm sorry, I have to say it because how many injuries happened the first 5 weeks? I mean, Saquon, Nick Bosa, all those other guys. But you get these beat writers coming out and saying, oh, you don't know what happens on the field. You don't know what happens in the locker room. You don't know what happens in what Joe Judge sees. So you automatically don't know. I mean, first of all, these are the fans that actually click on your stupid articles. So how dare you say something like that? And I get it. Fans are fans, just like we were talking about earlier about taking stuff and only saying half of it and knowing half the logic of a move or something like that. but these are the people that I would say somewhat look up to you because of your sources and stuff. With your sources, you're nothing. You really aren't, other than fans and sources. I mean, Andy Martino, he still gets recognition and he doesn't even have sources. He doesn't even break news. So it's just, again, amazing to me that some of these guys actually get traction. And listen, I like the Giants content creators. I've associated a lot with them on YouTube, at least within the first year of my content creating. The problem is, in my opinion, I think a lot of YouTubers need to be more vocal about this stuff. I'm not saying trash it like me, trash it like anybody else, but, and I always bring him up one way or another. His name is Cop Pizzle. You've heard of him,
Okay.
and Giants YouTuber. So he trashes the media a lot with the clickbait articles and that stuff. And a lot of Giant content creators don't like him because, he refers to the other guys as geeks. And that's why Giants guys don't like him. Um, but when we're talking about like the other content creators, the more popular ones, I just feel that they need to be more vocal about this stuff because a fan could go out there and say, okay, other than reaction, what is different when I'm looking at these two? I mean, seriously, that's just my opinion and how I would go about it. Because again, you need to, other than, the entertainment standpoint, you put that aside. If any podcast anyone listens to is entertaining, you know, and then the reaction. You put those two aside and you start making clickbait articles. And if you do or you don't, which is the difference? Which is the people that actually care about you, like the YouTubers, or are you going to go to the beat media and just read bland articles that only get them clicks? They don't benefit you, only for you information wise, which everyone would probably be spreading. So, what is your thoughts on that? I want to get a little of your gist, even though we've kind of been repeating
It's
the
great.
same thing.
It's a really good topic nowadays. I think a lot of it's changing, right? In my opinion, where I don't think it's going to, like the direction of having everyone just kind of set up where it's like these major networks and these guys breaking off and doing their own podcast where they basically follow the same format that they followed forever when they were working for a major network. It's all like you said, it's all kind of just regurgitated type of stuff that just kind of is repeated over and over again, and stats down the throat and all these different things, rather than taking the content and forming an opinion on it, and then also making it kind of like more entertaining than normal, right? That's something that I always try to drive for, where we take the facts, we stay hardcore fans, but then we also bring some jokes into it. We make it a little bit more personal. We try to like relate to like how, well, what if I was really the GM or what this, that, and not hold back to where I got to sit there and say, oh, wait, got to be careful if I say this because somebody might get pissed off on Tuesday because I said this thing yesterday, right? Like it's just annoying with that shit where a lot of these guys will just watch everything that they say as far as content's concerned in regard to like a sensitive topic. They won't actually ever really give their opinion. So after a while, it just becomes so robotic that like a lot of these things are boring. And I think there's other guys that are starting to create their different platforms now where they're getting away from that and they're kind of just giving it like a little bit more to the mainstream where they're saying, look, man, this is how it is. This is what I feel. Look, you don't have to agree with me. It's just my opinion, right? I'm not here to, I'm not trying to hurt nobody, but look, at the end of the day, maybe I don't agree with the way that this, this rule is in place, or that this, person got off with doing nothing, as far as, like you mentioned earlier with the whole, Porter thing, right? If you were, how like, uh, nothing was said for 2 weeks. So somebody should have came at him and said something like, who cares? Like, yo, that's what I felt. Like it bothered me, and I'm just gonna come at you with my opinion. And I just feel that like a lot of these podcasts are now, a good portion of them are trending that way, where they're getting away from the nonsense of always having to follow what the mainstream wants to do. Oh, 1,000 people on Twitter told me that I should feel this way. Well, screw it. Then I'll be the 5 people that feel this way. You know what I mean? But as long as it's like you're standing for something good rather than just trying to stand for something that's just a little too over the top or too personal to people, or really a sort of sensitive subject. But I don't know. That's just sort of how I feel. I think that like content is changing, and I think that's what these podcasts are allowing. And you're going to start to see a little bit of a change. I think even more so with the mainstream, where they're going to start to like sort of relax a little bit more and be a little bit more personal. Because you mentioned earlier about personalities. You're right. A lot of times you don't ever really get to learn these guys' personalities. They just sort of like plain, they just come at you one way. They give you the facts, and they're like, and that's because I've been doing it for 25 years, and that's ESPN, and we'll see you later. I don't know. That's what I've been finding lately. Like a lot more people want to see edgier and funnier and creative type of sort of podcasting.
And it comes down to two things. And I was having a discussion, more of a, I would say, almost argument with someone today because I had a website and he wants one direction, I want another. But we, come to a resolution on podcasting. But as I said, it's a different, sort of subject. Um, there's a lot of people out there, as I said earlier, with the clickbait content that they try to make websites and try to be the beat writers. Andy Martino or whatever guys anyone can think of, they try to be somebody else. You have to make your own content, and whether it's be entertaining, whether it's going to be informative.
Yes.
Sometimes you'll have those YouTubers, you'll have those podcasts where it's going to be boring as hell, but hey, it's informative. It's your own
Sure.
content, and if it gets views for you, and if it gets clicks for you, and your fans enjoy it, well, you know what? You have a success on your hands. And the other thing is that a lot of these beat writers, in ways, are scared to critique their own teams that they cover. And that I learned from another Jets podcast. It's called Let's Talk Jets Radio. They're actually probably streaming soon, but
Nice.
obviously this is in prep for Tuesday's podcast. But these guys, they used to have credentials. His name is Tyson Roush and Kevin Sorkin. These guys used to have credentials. They used to do the probably boringest things on planet Earth. They lost their credentials because they critiqued the team on too many occasions. And also for the fact that the one guy's dad is a season ticket holder for the Jets and said, hey, if your guy, meaning your son, hangs Jets apparel in the background, we're going to take away your season tickets, which is absolute bullshit because that team sucked for years. And
Yeah,
yes, that is a
seriously.
true story. And, ever since they lost their credentials, obviously they've had side jobs. One's a teacher and one's like martial arts, whatever. And they've been doing some funny stuff since then. Like they've attracted guys from other fan bases to go watch them. Like for the Super Bowl, they did a music funny comedy segment. They had the one guy beatboxing. It was, crazy all over the place. But I would say the main point of that is, create your own content, but don't try to, mock somebody else. Be your own person. And going back to the Beaver writers, if I didn't say earlier, a lot of them try to promote a team message. They're scared to rip their teams because they might get fired. They might get their credentials taken. So you have to read between the lines with this stuff. Going back to the Connolly thing, Giants fans absolutely hated it. Was it a good move? Yes and no, because we wouldn't have seen Tate Crowder, but at the same time, Ryan Connolly was coming off an ACL injury. And again, we didn't have, I would say, good linebacker two for the first 3 games of the season. It was Devontae
Yeah.
Downs. I mean, he sucked. He's a special teamer on the field. But the beat writers, again, if they don't agree with you, if the team message is, trying to make the best move for the Giants, they'll regurgitate that. And then you won't have, you'll get all these types of people disagreeing with you. So that's really my thing when it comes to be your own person. Don't be like them and, create your own content and don't promote a team message. Don't be afraid to rip the team. And also, don't be afraid with some of these Gettleman haters. Don't be afraid to go out there and have a change of heart and say, okay, Gettleman did this good. So, again, it's just transparency, and a lot of fans need to start waking up in that aspect.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, that's waking up in that aspect. That was a good one there because we'll say it a lot of times too, where it's people almost like they almost pretend they almost act like they're sheep, right? And that they're getting herd, like the herd is getting moved into one direction of an opinion, and that's it. You'll see you'll see the herd just go right along with it, and they're all like, "Oh yeah, that's good, that's great." I'm all for that opinion. That's that works for me. Instead of like sitting back and saying, "Look, man, form your own opinion, right? You're gonna get a lot of things thrown at you, especially on Twitter and YouTube and all types of stuff, and form your own opinion, man. Look, not every move the Giants make are going to be good. Like there's a lot I disagree with. And you know what? I never want to be on a platform where I have to worry about if I feel like saying Joe Judge made a mistake, that I want to criticize Joe Judge's move or Dave Gettleman or any of the players or anything like that. Screw that shit, man. I wouldn't do this if I couldn't at least be a true fan to say what I feel they could have done. Now, look, am I going to sit there and try to, criticize every move and say I could have done this better? No, of course not. But if there's something that's out there, like, for example, let's just say Gettleman goes through this draft up and coming in April and he makes a few mistakes. I'm gonna call him out, man. Like I have no problem doing that kind of shit. Right? I'll go back to a time when I'll never forget. Don't quote me on the year or the pick we had, but I remember and I wish Twitter and podcasts and all that kind of stuff was a thing then, right? Because I would have been livid. I'll never forget. I'm sitting there. I'm on my couch. I'm at home, and I'm looking at the pick, and they're literally going back and forth between taking Sean Alexander and Ron Dane. And I'm going crazy because I remember seeing Ron Dane play at the Meadowlands that season, and he just didn't look good. They used to have this thing called the Kickoff Classic, and he was playing on Wisconsin. I don't remember where they played. He didn't even look that good. He just had this huge offensive line, and he was a big guy himself, and he just would run behind it. And that was kind of it. He was just like a straight ahead type runner. And then you look at Sean Alexander, was this like dynamic back that could catch, he could run, he could do shit. I remember I'm sitting on the couch going crazy. I'm like, oh, Sean Alexander, please, please, please. Giants select Ron Dane. Listen, I got so sick to my stomach, I shut the TV off. I had to leave the house and go for a walk. All right. Like, that's how crazy it was. So, yo, I would have been fucking like on Twitter going crazy over that move. All right. Just to kind of give you the kind of perspective there. And I'll be honest, man, I flipped out when I heard Dale Jones's name. I'm not going to lie. I thought we should have went defense there. I was one of those guys. So, listen, it's going to get entertaining that first week in May when you get me back on the podcast and I see some of the picks that we actually had to make it.
Definitely. A lot of, when I was going back to the Gettleman haters, let's acknowledge the fact that a lot of these guys don't say that they were for Saquon Barkley in 2018. The whole fan base was, I would say persuaded, hypnotized by the idea. Let's give Eli one more year and we're going to get Saquon as the running back. And Dave Gettleman kind of said, Saquon's a good guy. He's a good pick. He's a generational talent in one of the press conferences. And a lot of Giants fans said, okay, he's going to pick Saquon Barkley. What do? He picked Saquon Barkley. Let's be honest here. I wanted Josh Allen. I wanted a fully rebuild in that situation. People were telling me, and I had Penn State fans because I lived in Pennsylvania at the time, tell me, oh, Saquon Barkley, he should be the second overall pick. And I said, no, we need to rebuild right now. We need to get a quarterback, Josh Allen. And then, one of my teachers said to me, there's a they'll take the quarterback next year, which they ended up doing. But, at the same time, some of these guys don't come out there and say, oh, well, I was for Saquon Barkley. Nobody says that because it's not to their narrative. It's not to, if they're afraid, for lack of better words, if anybody finds that out about them, if anybody does that research and goes back to 2018, that they're going to lose all of following, when they really won't. They'll just stick with the other Giant fans that rip Gettleman, and we'll actually come out and have the balls and say, okay, I wanted Saquon Barkley in 2018. And then the other guy, when I was talking about the guy who has like the 9 subscribers on YouTube, he's like, oh, why didn't we take Darius Leonard? Why didn't we take Fred Warner? Why didn't we take Quentin Nelson? Did you know that? Did other teams have insight that those 2 linebackers were going to be as good as they are? Darius Leonard and Fred Warner? What about, how many times that people criticize Jerry Reese picks? Is that too far in the past that we can't talk about? Evan Ingram could have taken Ryan Ramczyk, who's now on the Saints, and he's the right tackle. What about Leonard Floyd? What if we traded up to get a marquee pass rusher instead of taking Eli Apple at 10, whatever pick it was? So please, spare me the nonsense. And I get it. Some Giant fan also who appeared on my channel one time just to do a breakdown of something went out and said on Twitter, the number 2 pick is still relevant. But what is complaining about it going to do? Giants fans, sometimes they just live in a bubble. Sometimes they live in a bubble and think everything that they say the Giants can hear and will listen to. That's no organization ever. No organization ever does that. That would be the worst organization in all of sports, especially if they were based in New York. But in the same time, Giants don't hear that. What is bitching and moaning going to get you in the future when you're talking about, oh, Dave Gettleman this, Dave Gettleman that? Look, be an optimistic Giants fan. Say, okay, this team's heading in the right direction with Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman did some good things, and be done with it. Stop complaining on Twitter. And, again, you're only losing your self-followers, I think, at that point. Because some people, they'll just go out there and say, okay, Dave Gettleman did this wrong. He really needs to prove himself this year. But they're going to get sick and tired eventually of all the content that they're putting out on Twitter in terms of tweets. Oh, Dave Gettleman this. And as I said earlier, some of these guys, when they go on YouTube, they're 2 different people. Complain about Gettleman on Twitter, but they'll discuss the other topics on YouTube. So it doesn't make any sense. They're trying to find the balance of not losing followers and subscribers. Meanwhile, a lot of people have done that already with the anti-Gettleman crowd. So it just amazes me.
I know. Yeah, no, listen, that's why I said I think it has something to do with the fact that like Twitter, you can hide behind a profile pic and just tweet shit out from your phone versus YouTube, where they're gonna actually see the words like, oh, this is coming out of my mouth, these words, right? Like if people like they want to be a lot more cooler when they're on YouTube and everything. Look, I'll be honest with you, in that 2018 draft. Look, I'm a Penn State fan. I grew up being one. I never went to the school there, but I have friends that played and stuff like that for them. But I was all for it. I loved Barkley. I loved him in college. So seeing him come on my team, anytime I get a player that I enjoyed watching in college come to my team, I'm all for it. You look at that draft, yes, Josh Allen, he had a fantastic year this past season, without a doubt. I had him on a bunch of my fantasy teams. I had a feeling he was going to break out, especially, with Diggs being there, and they had a few pieces working in the right way for him this year. But again, if you were to tell me we would have taken him number 2 overall, there would have been a lot of backlash to that. And he didn't have the best rookie season. And forget it. If they were crucifying, Gettleman for Barkley, could you imagine what they would have done to Josh Allen in this part of New York?
After
Because don't
2
forget, he
years
does
of
play.
having a subpar completion percentage.
Correct.
Everybody talks
And
about
don't
that
forget,
now.
yeah, right. In Western New York, you can get away with that shit. You're not getting away with that in South New York, right? All right, the city will rip you apart, man. Like up there, they feel for you. They like it. He's a good guy. Like he does a lot for the community, so they get behind him. But over here, we would have ripped that dude to pieces, man. I don't even know if he would have made it with the Giants, right? To be fair, I mean, he might have, but you never know. I know he got a great relationship with the offensive coordinator up there this past season. That's one of the reasons why he stayed on, for another year for them, so they can make a push in 2021. And he just was able to take it to that next level, and hopefully he just continues to move forward. But I mean, when you look at the rest of those quarterbacks with Josh Rosen and Darnold, I mean, like, dude, we would have been lost, I feel, with any of them quarterbacks. If Barkley doesn't get hurt last season, I don't even think we're having this conversation, right? Because the guy would have probably ran for like 1,200 plus yards. He would have scored 10 touchdowns. He would have caught like another 60, 70 passes for another, 600 yards. And we wouldn't have been having this. The guy would have been close to, 2,000 all-purpose yards with like over 10 touchdowns. And no one would be questioning this number 2 pick. But the fact was he got hurt a little bit year 2. Then he misses all of last season pretty much because, he got hurt real early in game 2. And that's it. Now all of a sudden we're kind of writing him off where that's it. Barkley, he might be a bust. He might be this. We should have done 14 other moves. Like it doesn't work anymore. Gettleman doesn't know what he's doing. He should be fired. And that's where all this nonsense just starts swirling up in Twitter. But look, if he let's say he is 100% healthy in 2021, rushes for like say 1,300 yards, scores 10 touchdowns, catches another 60 passes for another say 400 or 500 yards. Who's going to be complaining about him? That's what I want to see.
See, that's also something I said a couple of times on a couple of different YouTube channels. When the Giants, if they start winning, let's just say they go out to a 4-2 record, have maybe a top 10 defense, top 15, top 10 offense, maybe. That's a really stretch of imagination. But let's say they do it, you're going to see, and Giants fans hopefully will wake up to see this point. Who just wants the team to do well and who just wants to complain and make content and clickbait? That's what we're going to see. If the Giants make that next step next year with Daniel Jones and all the weapons that hopefully he's surrounded by, you're going to see a breakthrough. You're going to have one side where it's, oh, Giants fans were just complaining because they want the team to win. Or it's going to be, oh, we're going to criticize every Gettleman move ever just to get likes on tweets. So that's something you're definitely going to see at that point in the game. And we'll see what happens in 2021. But once again, I'm not no Gettleman lover. I'm not no Gettleman hater. But at the same time, give him his credit where the credit is due.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there. I told a lot of my good friends when they were complaining about, I said, look, man, it's ride or die this year, right? Like he's got his chance. He's got a few picks in. Give him this one more draft. He's not going to make such terrible decisions on the 2021 draft where we're going to be, that's it. Now we're 5 years behind. It's not going to happen that way. He's still going to get some good talent. He's done it all through. And look, if I come out and I start saying that this guy's the guy to pick and this is who I would take and I get behind it, trust me, I'll eat crow. All right. I was a huge Isaiah Simmons fan last season and I was pumping that up, man. I was posting, tweeting those pictures of him in the Giants uniform and shit. And look, I get it. He may need another season or two to develop. And, I don't want to just say that he's going to be a bust or anything with Arizona. However, taking Andrew Thomas, finding out that he played on an ankle that he needed surgery on after the end of the season, that he waited all year to make sure he played the rest of the season until getting that surgery, man. And he actually got better as the season went on. I think Andrew Thomas is really still going to be a fit. A lot of times I think too, especially with, you say with the clickbait and just trying to get shit out there and making it so easy to do. I see a lot of times that people, they'll just give up on guys way too early. Years ago, a quarterback would come into the league, they wouldn't even smell the field for the first 3 seasons of their career. Now all of a sudden it's like the guy's got to come in game one, he's got to be able to throw 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, right? It's like ridiculous the expectations we have for them. Same thing with an offensive lineman. It might take the guy a year or two to just develop a little bit. Like let him get used to the speed, the terminology, just going against guys that have been doing it as a professional for 10 years, running at them that are like all pros and everything. It's a huge adjustment from going from a college game to the NFL, right? One thing you always hear, the thing that changes when you go from, say, being a high school, standout to then a college level, then to the pros, is the game just keeps getting faster and faster and faster every level, right? The major difference between, say, like when you see like an Alabama versus a Clemson game versus, say, like Columbia versus Harvard or something, is the speed, right? The speed and the talent. Like that's the main difference. These guys can all play football. It's just that when you literally start gritting up there, you have guys that are, almost like freaks of nature, if you will, where they're like 6'6", 280, and they're running like 4.5 40s, which is just like ridiculous, right? But some of these guys are doing that, man. And like that's what the adjustment has to do. And the guys that work hard, stay in the gym, stay late with practice, they develop. And there's nothing showing that Andrew Thomas wouldn't be that kind of guy that is going to put in the work that he needs to just get to that next level. And I expect big things out of him in 2021.
Imagine if the Giants took Josh Rosen at 2. A, because it's a quarterback. B, because of what he said when he got drafted by the Cardinals. 10 mistakes were made before me. There was 9 or 10 mistakes were made before me. Like, he wanted to pull in Aaron Rodgers in that aspect, because I think Rodgers said something similar in the 2005 draft. But then look how his career, it's unfortunate what happened in Arizona, but now they surrounded Murray with talent. I mean, obviously, a lot of people think the Cardinals are a fake team. I honestly think they are a little bit. I need to see more out of them, because what they finished 8-8 last year. But it was sad what happened with Rosen. But you know what, dude? When you're saying, 9 mistakes were made before me, and now Josh Allen's emerging with the talent he has, again, just shut your mouth and wait for wait for yourself to develop, wait for your team to develop. It's not just about you, and that's unfortunately what a lot of these players in the modern NFL think. Think it's about them. And again, one of the reasons why I wanted to trade Odell Beckham Jr., not that I wanted to trade him, but more like I started agreeing with it after he got traded. Because I started seeing, what it was eventually going to bring. Dexter Lawrence, Jabril Peppers, O'Shane Ximines, some of the other guys that we got in that trade. So obviously you'll still have a couple of OBJ fans out there. What did you think of the trade at first, and then what was your later reaction?
So I have this thing that I always say, right? There always seems to be a player that'll end up on your team that if he wasn't on your team, your friends will know you. They'll know the type of guys that you'll root for and won't root for. They'll be the first ones that will say to you, man, if that dude wasn't on your team, would you still like him? I'd be like, hell no. And OBJ came into the league where I was like, yo, that dude is nasty. He's a tremendous talent. But it was like after his first 2 seasons, he just started walking around like he was the man. He didn't have to do anything anymore. Like that was it. Like he was God in New York. Like he just won back-to-back Super Bowls and like whatever. He's got a 12-inch, right? But whatever. Well, with all that said, it was just, he just had that sort of attitude where it was just like, man, if this dude wasn't a Giant and let's say he was like an Eagle, that would probably be my most hated Eagle. Like I couldn't stand him, right? So, at first, the thing I guess that was surprising with the trade was the whole signing trade that we signed him to the big contract, paid him like we did.
But obviously,
yeah, and then turn around and trade him. But
yeah.
I get it. It wasn't working with that coaching regime at the time. It just there was pieces missing. There was just they didn't have true leadership, right? Or if they did, it wasn't the right type of leadership. And where Odell could have been that guy, could have been wearing the C for the Giants, should have been, right? Having the talent he did and the leadership just off of his ability is what kind of pulled away from it. So I getting that out of there, and that's sort of what we've been like kind of seeing now with Judge, right? He's bringing in that Nick Saban, that Bill Belichick sort of, community, if you would, that's there, right? Where they're not going to put up with that nonsense. You know what I mean? Like, look, DeAndre Baker ended up not, getting convicted of anything, right? He ended up playing in the NFL later on this season. And yet, just not to have that distraction or have that kind of a player on the team who was even involved in something as stupid as that is the kind of the message that Judge is sending, right? And we had a debate like, oh, what if Odell came back? Would he be a great weapon? And you know what? No, I think that ship sailed. Like I would not want to see Odell return to the Giants. Not anymore. Unless somehow, some way, this guy was completely reformed and like he's just a completely totally person. Grew up. He did sort of like what a Chris Carter did, right? If you read about what Chris Carter did years ago, where he had a substance problem with alcohol and everything, and then all of a sudden turned his career around from the Eagles and went to Minnesota and was just, a different person altogether. And I'm not saying that Odell has a substance problem or anything like that, but he definitely has something wrong where it could just be like he's a narcissist or something of that nature. Where if he lost some of that and was a little more humble and came to this team and was trying to show some of these younger guys like how to make it in the NFL, yeah, I'd take him back, but it's just not likely, and I would never see him. He's probably never going to be in Giants blue again.
That's another reason another YouTuber brought it up. You should never marry a player like Odell. You're going to have fan favorites,
Sure.
but if the Giants don't sign Barkley to an extension either this year or next year, that's going to be another player on the list where heads are wanting to roll. Giants fans will be angry. That's why a lot of people don't purchase jerseys anymore.
Yeah.
They'll take a jersey of a past Giant.
True.
They'll take a jersey of a past Giant like Eli or maybe Lawrence Taylor. They won't purchase a new Giant jersey because that person may be, traded or dealt sometime. For example, on Christmas or near Christmas of 2018, I got a Landon Collins jersey. 3 months later, he goes to Washington Redskins football team, however you call it. And I was so pissed. But then I learned my lesson. I said, look, obviously I have a Daniel Jones T-shirt. I mean, we'll see what happens with him. But obviously, I said, listen, I said to myself, I can't be doing this anymore where I'm blowing money on players that are never on the team anymore. Nonetheless, going to rivals. So I think that's, it's just being a fan. I'm not ripping anybody for it, but I think the ship has to sail at some point with Giant fans and that aspect of moving on from Odell. And you'll still have those people out there that still like the guy, still think it's a bad move and whatever.
Sure.
But luckily, a lot of, what these anti-Gettleman critics are saying, I don't think it's been part of the OBJ trade. I mean, that you could say that. I don't know if other Giant fans or the critics are saying, OBJ trade, that's what did it for the franchise. But it's been mostly the second overall pick. And I hate hearing this phrase 15 and 33. At the same time, you could say, oh, his first year was impacted by Mara because they wanted to win one more for Eli. I get that, but at the same time, it falls on Gettleman. But at the same time, it does not take, 2 years to rebuild the team entirely. They're not going to become a contender in 2-3 years. It takes a while. And people say, oh, look what the Bills did. Look what the, I don't know how many other teams did. But, they could say, oh, look what the Browns did. The Browns took how many years to get their organization right? How many years it took for them to get a good GM, so, just have to put that context in there. Everything is not, just a headline. You can't just, it's context that works with these things. And a lot of Giant fans and just a lot of fans in general don't read between the lines with the context. They just take the headline and they run with it and they say stuff and then they look like an a-hole on Twitter.
Yeah, no, it's so true, man. And look, you're right. Cleveland took forever to rebuild. I mean, and it's only this year that Baker Mayfield actually took it to the next level, right? I mean, he was another guy that they were kind of writing him off as a bust. And in this season, he kind of progressed, kind of similar to Josh Allen. I think he got overshadowed because Allen just really blew up. Where, Baker had a pretty good year. I mean, if you look at his numbers across the board, obviously I don't have them up in front of me, but they were actually pretty solid. And that's part of the reason. But part of it is too is that they have this dynamic run game with Chubb and Hunt that's also developed, right? Hunt going into the trouble that he had and in Kansas City cutting him. All of a sudden he signs with Cleveland. Now you have these two dynamic running backs that you can create this running game. Myles Garrett with the pass rush. I mean, they had a lot of pieces that took a long time for them to get there, and yet they got to repeat again this season, right? Like they just did it this one year. There's no guarantee, especially with Pittsburgh and the Ravens in that division and Cincinnati getting better, that they're going to be good again, right? They can end up an 8-18 really easily this season, with things going on or another major injury. Burrow doesn't come back. If Burrow comes back healthy, Cincinnati is going to be a good team too. I know they're picking fifth, but they're an up and coming team in that division. So you never know, right? And you'll hear a lot of it too with Miami, right? They'll talk about the Dolphins. Well, the Dolphins turned everything around, and it's such nonsense. It's so annoying to hear that kind of shit. We literally had a team that wasn't all in when Gettleman inherited it, and what I mean by that is like you touched on, where they weren't all in on rebuild. They were like, you know what, we still got Eli. He still got a little left in the tank. Let's just try to win something for him now. And that was kind of what we first did. And then it didn't work. And we realized that the team wasn't nearly what we thought it was. You know, we were missing pieces on offense, we were missing pieces on defense, and we weren't in a position to do it. So we didn't. So now you basically wasted a year or two with that mentality, where now we had to recover from that, right? And that's what we're kind of doing. You see it with some of the picks. I mean, what, 3 offensive linemen in last year's draft? You know, I'm still okay if we take one in the second round, maybe in this year's draft. So, you know, there's a lot of pieces that are coming together where, you know what, we're not winning the Super Bowl maybe in 2021, but there's not saying that we can't be an 8-8, 9-7, maybe even 10-6 team this year. Who knows, right? If the right things are put together as far as the offseason and the draft is concerned.
Definitely. And considering the draft, I know you said earlier that you didn't want to take Jalen Waddle at 11. Who were your primary options, and why would you not take Jalen Waddle at 11?
Well, you know, it's funny because I actually gave one scenario where I would be okay with taking Jalen Waddle. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'll go into the other portion of it. My scenario with that is if the Giants are able to obviously keep, you know, we got to figure out what we're going to do on defense, you know, with Leonard Williams and Dalvin Thompson, right, and all that, and making sure that these guys are kept as well, right? But if we're able to sign like a receiver, like say Corey Davis, right, 26 years old, guy 6'3", 225, former 5th overall pick, coming off of one of his best seasons in a team where he was basically the 3rd option, maybe the 4th option, right? You know, I could kind of see, and you know, I don't want to make a comparison to Plaxico because they're different players, but I can see this kind of big receiver coming in where we can finally have that target in the red zone that's a big body that can get the ball for us, right? If you bring a guy in like that, and then you want to tell me that Jalen Waddle could then line up where he could start running his curl routes, and you know, you have some blockers down the field that can actually block some safeties, you know, maybe, right, maybe. But again, this is me really stretching and kind of biting my tongue here, because I just think that at 11, with all the things that you're seeing currently going on with as far as the possibility of 4 quarterbacks being taken in the top 10, which I highly doubt, but I could easily see 3 be taken, right? There's the possibility of definitely 2 wide receivers getting taken in that top 10, maybe another lineman or 2. You have Pitts as the tight end. I mean, all of a sudden, you know, you're down to, you know, 10 guys already. And now you still have guys like Farley that are there for a corner, right? Because you could grab one of these big time corners, and Patrick Surtain, right? These are some big names that could fall to that. Now, I haven't even mentioned one of these DNs, right? Or these edge rushers in like Woody Pay or Rouse's, right? I always mispronounce his name, the guy from Miami, right? Like that, you know, I haven't even gotten to this. I think at 11, the Giants should have something fall to them. I don't want it to be where, oh, Waddle's still available and we need to reach and grab him here at 11, because let's face it, last season they were talking of Henry Ruggs, and they were basically comparing Waddle to Ruggs, these burners, and you know, Ruggs throws his blazing speed in the combine on a 40-yard dash, and that's where everybody just kind of said, wow, this guy could be a game breaker. Yeah, if you have pieces in place, you get one of these shorter, like speedster wide receivers, they're going to be able to stretch and open the field for you. And that they need to fall right into that kind of team. I took a look at like a team like Cincinnati, right, where you have like a Tyler Boyd and Higgins. You put both of those guys on the outside, they're big guys. And now you put like a Jalen Waddle who's just running wild over the middle and deep. Yeah, that's going to create trouble. And that's where this guy's like real talent is going to be able to be put on display and work. Whereas for the Giants, we don't really have that yet, you know, and we're expecting this dude to just come in and be this playmaker that, first of all, he's coming off of a major injury. An ankle injury like that is not something to take lightly. He may have forced himself back into that championship game, which, yes, there was flashes of him looking, but he was clearly hobbled. He wasn't ready. There's not going to be any kind of combine, so we're not even going to see if that ankle's 100%. And now you're going to have this guy.
Doctors aren't even allowed to examine.
Right. You know, and to me, at the 11th pick overall, that's a huge risk for you know, years ago would have been an undersized receiver because he's under 6 foot. You know, a guy that relies on his speed and is coming off of a major ankle injury. And yet his teammate Henry Ruggs was supposed to be just as good, if not better. There was a comparison between the two. And Ruggs had 26 catches for Vegas when they took him in the first round last year. There's some red flags there that make me worried about taking a guy like Waddle at 11. I hope to God that someone takes him either earlier or something else falls to us there, like maybe Pitts or As I mentioned, I look, if we Patrick Surtain is sitting there at 11, and some of these other, like Chase is off the board, and Devontae Smith, who I'm huge on, is off the board. I would love Patrick Surtain. I mean, Dan, there goes our CB2, and all of a sudden we might have arguably one of the best secondaries in the NFL. Period. Right. And so that's exciting to kind of look at as well. So that's sort of where I'm kind of going with it, and that's sort of my big knock on Waddle. I know that Devontae Smith gets a lot of knock because he's undersized as far as his weight's concerned. But the guy's dynamic, man. If you look at his numbers even from last season, he still put up numbers with Ruggs and Judy on that team. I mean, how does that not say something for you? And then all of a sudden, you get an injured player in Waddle this season, and he just takes over and has one of the best wide receiver seasons in college history. Like, you can't just ignore that type of shit and just be like, oh, well, he's 15 pounds underweight, so he's not going to make it in the NFL. Like, dude, he could grow into like a man body, they call it, right? As he starts hitting his mid-20s and put on a few natural pounds of weight and still be effective and have a good, long, promising NFL career. So I guess if I had my choice pick this year, it would be Devontae Smith. I don't think he's going to be there at 11. But if we, like I said, with the exception of like Trevor Lawrence falling to 11, who I would just be ridiculous, of course. But Smith would be my number one. Pitts is sort of creeping into being number two. If he's there, you got to really consider taking Pitts there at 11.
I do agree with the Waddle part. I think a lot of giant content creators honestly underrate the part of his injury, because they mention absolutely, to be honest, really nothing about that. Obviously, there are questions about Smith. And one thing that a giant content creator brought up is with Patrick Surtain or Caleb Farley, you're not getting a cornerback two. You're getting a second cornerback one, shutdown corner. And I know a lot of Giant fans have PTSD from the Jerry Reese era of drafting Amukamara and Eli Apple, but give Gettleman and this coaching staff a chance, and maybe you get a second cornerback one, a shutdown corner. But in my opinion, honestly, with this whole draft, and I haven't made as a pinpoint decision of who I want to take. If the Giants take like Carter Samuel or Corey Davis in free agency, because they're not getting Galladay or Robinson. Let's be honest. Let's put the fairy tales aside. If the Giants get Samuel or Davis, I would not go ahead and double up in the first round and get Waddle, to be honest with you, because A, he's likely the wide receiver there. B, if you can attack another need, like maybe tight end, maybe linebacker with Karamoa or Micah Parsons, maybe you can attack, obviously, as we just talked about, the second cornerback spot. If you can attack those positions, fine. That's all fine and well. I think this draft, meaning 2020, should have, for lack of better words, taught Giant fans the first round doesn't mean crap. Because you take a look at the talent we got in the later rounds. You take a look at Cam Brown, special teams contributor. You take a look at Carter Coughlin as well. He played really well in his rookie year for someone who's a 7th round pick. So I think a lot of Giant fans have to open up to that. And in that situation, if Giants got Samuel or Davis, I pick a corner, Surtain or Farley, honestly, in the 11th spot. Or we could trade down maybe with a quarterback needy team if it's Washington or if it's the Bears, now that they didn't get Wentz. And then I would take a wide receiver in the 2nd, 3rd, maybe 4th round, because obviously we have to address the interior of the O-line with Lemieux's struggles. I mean, I'm not saying count him out, but at the same time, you want to add depth there. I would not, have a problem with them taking an offensive tackle, maybe. Also, linebacker, as I said, and some other needs, maybe like a tight end, like a Pat Fryermuth out of Penn State. Two things a tight end needs to have to be elite in the NFL. You need a block and you need to catch passes. Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, all those guys, Fryermuth fits the profile of that. Pitts, a lot of people say that he can't block. And a lot of people, are saying, everyone has different scouting reports on him, but a lot of people are saying, oh, he can only go to the outside. He's basically a wide receiver with his frame. But unfortunately, some cases, he can't beat the one-on-one matchups with cornerbacks, because that's what we saw out of Evan Ingram, or at least, scouted in him, is that he creates mismatches with linebackers and safeties. He doesn't do that with cornerbacks. He doesn't create the separation. So I think that's a lot of criticism anyone's going to get for, or at least, debated topic on whether you want Pitts or not. But I wouldn't be opposed to it, and I wouldn't be opposed to Waddle at the same time. I just really fear some of the injury history as well. And it also depends on what the Giants do in free agency. It really does, because as Dave Gettleman and John Mara said, we need a playmaker. And going back to the Pitt subject, a lot of people say, oh, wide receiver. That doesn't always mean playmaker. Just because it's wide receiver doesn't mean he's playmaker. Kyle Pitts could be the centerpiece of the offense. Who knows? We could have a two tandem tight end duo, like back in New England. I mean, a lot of people have brought that up. So it's not, as I said, Giants fans have to really open their mind, at least up to this draft. And you have to open your mind to something else too. Caleb Farley opted out in 2020. So did Micah Parsons and a couple other these prospects. So if one falls to you, you have to rely on their 2019 tape, A, and B, you can't be opposed. So, and obviously teams will, go out and look at the pro days. But once again, you have to have a lot of options there, and you can't just say, "Oh, my primary pick's Jalen Waddle." It also depends on the situation as well.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, especially with the whole free agency, right? It's going to really depend on if you're right. I mean, look, if we ended up getting Curtis Samuel, Corey Davis, you're right. Then I don't think necessarily we're drafting that wide receiver one unless, like I mentioned earlier, like Chase somehow fell there or, Devontae Smith. Then you got to really think about that again, right? And doubling up because, Gettleman has been known to double up in the past, right? He's done things like that in Carolina where he's taken. He took he took Norman and then took a couple of corners right there in the next rounds, right? So he's done things of that nature, right? And I'm not saying that that's what we got to do, but it's a possibility. But you're right. You know what? We got some great depth late, right? I know Lemieux's been somewhat of a favorite, not a favorite. He did a pretty damn good job, especially being like, I think, what was he, 5th, 6th round pick? You got to give him a little bit of credit. Like that's a guy, right? I was talking about how Andrew Thomas might need a season or two to develop. We talk about a 5th, 6th round lineman. They're going to definitely need a year or two to develop, right? There's going to be sort of no question in regards to that. But and this is something, and you're right. I'd even bring up Parsons. There's a lot of just sort of iffy talent because of the way things went down in 2020 with the fact that now a lot of these guys have to just show what they did in 2019. And that's what we got to kind of take for credit as to take with these guys with a top 10 pick where you might see a Parsons drop to 11, and I'm not opposed to taking him either. I just don't think he's going to last to there. Look, there's a really good chance, especially with all the hype. I mean, look, if all this Twitter hype is going on, and it's not just Giants Twitter, it's just Twitter in general. Oh, Pitts, he's the next guy. Yeah, he's a generational talent. They love throwing around that one, right? He might get taken. He could very easily get taken by Cincinnati. He could get taken by the Eagles. He could get taken by Carolina because they love the tight end, right? They haven't had one since Greg Olsen. So, I mean, there's plenty of guys that could teams rather, can end up taking that guy, but I just, one thing that I feel sort of confident with as far as the Giants are concerned is, I told you, they're saying 3 quarterbacks to 4, 2 offensive linemen possibly, a tight end, 3 wide receivers, 2 corners, a linebacker can all be picked in that top 10. Right. But the talent is so good that almost any one of those guys at 11 fits in really well as well, fits in really well there as a pick. So that's where, like you said, I don't know if I could literally hang my hat on anybody except for maybe Chase, right? I mean, Chase fell into 11. He was sitting there. It's like, whoa, all right. Yeah, I got this guy, no doubt. But that's why I didn't even mention his name before, because I'm like, there's no way Chase has fallen to 11. But if he did, because he did opt out too, and you could kind of go through the same shit with LSU and say, look, he only had the 1 season. He had Joe Burrow. Everybody else was lighting it up that year. I doubt it, but if he did fall to 11, I mean, shit, that would be great. So there's gonna be a lot of that, and like you said, the really big thing that people got to really kind of focus on is the free agency, right? What are we doing free agency? Because that's going to kind of dictate, or at least give an idea of who we should go after with that 11th pick once we know if we even signed anybody at that point.
I think it opens up to 2 things. If the Giants do not re-sign Leonard Williams, I think Dave Gettleman and the Giants staff will say, listen, we need to get a pass rushing / run stuffing defensive tackle. Maybe like the guy out of Alabama, Christian Barnamore, I think his name is. Maybe they take him in the 2nd round or something like that. Maybe they find someone who could trade up or wants to trade up for a quarterback, and they trade down and maybe select Barnamore with like the 20-something pick. So that's something that Giant fans, or at least anyone themselves, have to open up to, possibly, the situation. Dalvin's a different story because as much as he is an underrated Giant, he is replaceable at some extent. We still have BJ Hill and RJ McIntosh on the roster, And those guys can still be used. I would like that to happen if we don't re-sign Dalvin. If he's looking at 10 million, $11 million a year, which yes, he can take, and he kind of does deserve it a little bit, but he said he was going to take the hometown discount. And when you say something like that, Giants kind of lower their price a little bit just to prioritize Williams. And then when you want this, higher price than kind of what the Giants were envisioning, you're going to get two separate directions. And unfortunately, he'll be walking in free agency to a different team. But, prioritize the talent you have on the roster with McIntosh and Hill. McIntosh was out all 16 games last year because he was never activated. But I want to see a little bit more of him, not just somebody just throw in the trash. I mean, they could end up taking like a 6th-round D tackle, but who knows? And also, it opens up to another subject because this happened, last week? Carson Wentz traded Indy. They may look for another quarterback and not stick to Jalen Hurts, someone who Doug Peterson drafted. So that is definitely something for a lot of mock drafts to go after, even though they are really not accurate outside the top 10. But it's definitely a note to take if you're draft scouts around the league, if you're a GM around the league. Hey, the Eagles might not take Parsons. They might not take another wide receiver. They might not take a corner. They might take a quarterback. So it depends what the Eagles are scouting, but obviously other teams won't know about that. But I'd like to move into the Yankees a little bit. Obviously, spring training has begun. I've already started looking up Yankees tickets, even though they're at 10% capacity. Anyone who's listening, though, definitely, and I don't know if they're going to update this with all the prices going up and whatnot, but it seems, pretty regulatory right now. StubHub, Ticketmaster, and SeatGeek are the best. Don't go to Vivid Seats. Don't go to, I don't know what the Yankees website does. I think they do Ticketmaster, but don't go to Vivid Seats. They're super expensive. But I've had a couple of good times there. I know at least where I want to sit. But nonetheless, that's going to be in April. I got to see what the weather looks like because I went on opening day once back in 2016 when the Yankees versus the Astros. It was freezing that day. Nonetheless, the Yankees lost. So, but definitely, obviously, with spring training coming back this Sunday, and there's been news and camp and everything, obviously with the Zach Britton, Domingo Germán stuff. What do you think on that? Because obviously, Britton opened his mouth. Chapman's had a talk with him and said, I want to keep this private. What do you think of that whole situation? And I'm not saying what he did was right, but my opinion is, look, he served his year-long suspension. He obviously missed some time, I think, in the postseason as well, if I'm not mistaken, something related to that. But he did his time now, and I get it. He will have to regain trust from his teammates. But this is not the time to start, talking up and saying, "Oh, we don't trust him now." Keep that in the locker room, especially when you're in the New York media. So I think Zach Britton needs to be a little bit smarter. But once again, it's not like Domingo Germán, what he did was right. So I want to get your kind of thoughts. I want to pick your brain a little bit on that one.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's crazy, right? Because I guess with the shortened season last year and then almost not even being a season, everything just kind of focused on football, right? I mean, I know we had a baseball season last year, but like, man, football just took over, right? Like there was no fantasy for baseball, none of this shit. And literally, like just this past week, I was getting texts from my buddies going, "Oh man, yo, fantasy baseball, you're in, right?" And I'm like, "Oh shit, baseball season's like here again. Like I gotta start focusing in on some of my Yankee stuff. Like, man, this came out of nowhere. I can't believe it. Like it's gonna be opening day, like in like a week, it feels like. But no, on a serious note with that, like, hey, listen, you're right. Opening day, April baseball is hit or miss, man. There's been some games I've gone to that have been like, wow, I'm running around with a t-shirt on because it's beautiful out. And then there's been days where like I got like a winter jacket on. I'm like, I'm dying to get out of there. I feel like I'm on a football game or something, right? But like, that's just how it is when it comes to that. And look, is it a little surprising that Britton was able to leak out a few things and a few comments, being a Yankee? Yes, because you don't usually see that unless it's like, Derek Jeter speaking out or stepping up as a captain for someone, that's usually when you'll see, or one of the managers just kind of taking reins on it. Or of course, like, when George was the owner and he was running the team, like he would say whatever the fuck he wanted to. He was the owner and he did what he did, right? So it's a rarity to see any kind of debate or any kind of confrontation go public in a Yankee uniform. That's just something I'm not, too familiar with. I don't think it's going to create much of a problem. I think they're going to nip that shit in the butt quick because that's just how the Yankees do things, man. Like, look, it got out a little bit and this leaked out. Somebody at some point, if they think there's anything that needs to be said or the story gets bigger than it should be, they're going to come out and say, look, it was a misunderstanding. It's taken care of, and that's how we do things, right? And that's the end of it. You're not going to hear anything more about it. This is our teammate, and we're moving forward. All right, because they're just not, they've never been that team or organization that has had any kind of that kind of crap going on, unless you got to go way back with like Thurman Munson and shit, like back in the 70s, right? But again, that was a crazy era, right? And you read up and you see some of this shit that was like in these type of things, and he had to like check Reggie Jackson. But Thurman Munson being the captain, he checked Reggie, and then you never heard that shit again, right? And it was taken out of context. If you look back, this whole thing that he was like the straw that stirred the drink, and you can look it up. You can watch the thing called The Bronx is Burning. They go through that whole little, they play it out in that show. It's a great show. But anyway, that's just how the Yankees are. You don't hear this kind of nonsense. It doesn't get carried over for long. They nip that shit in the bud, if you would, and that's it. They move forward because that's just the type of organization you're talking about.
Definitely do agree on that, and obviously, we're two separate managers now. Two separate managers are going to take it the way it is. Obviously, some moments where Yankee fans, including myself, would like to go back to the Girardi era. Um, but also, unfortunately, this going a little bit off topic, but it's still related to the Yankees. Is I was looking up Yankee tickets. I thought to myself, obviously, the last game I went to was the 19-5 blowout, and that was supposed to be a birthday gift.
Oh gosh.
And me and my friend were trying to decide a little bit. I mean, my uncle obviously got me the tickets because he's works for this company in Red Hook, and he has a guy there that he sells the tickets, and whatever he has left is basically free to take. And we were sitting, I would say, next to the section in the Delta Skybox Suite. So it was like section like 215 or something like that. And obviously we watched the 19-5 blowout. And my friend always says to me, we could have went to that Tuesday Orioles game. I said, you know what? That was not my decision. So you know what? Don't blame me for that stuff. But unfortunately, that's the last memory I have at Yankee Stadium, at least for right now. And then the last sporting event I was at was November 2019 when the Knicks lost to the Charlotte Hornets. I think, yeah, when Fizdale was still coaching, but that was a hellhole. Definitely so. Clark Schmidt, he's out for a couple of weeks. Gio Estrella may play on Sunday, and Brett Gardner obviously is coming back. And what do you think of Clint Frazier finally getting the spotlight in left field?
I think it's a long time coming. I mean, listen, the kid has proved it a few times. I get it. He goes on these like flashes where all of a sudden he's hitting like, 360, right? With like 10 home runs or something ridiculous, right? And of course I'm exaggerating, but he looks like he's going to be Mickey Mantle, right? And then he goes back to being Clint Frazier, right? and like, just like that overnight. So I don't know, listen, anytime, a player gets called up or they're playing, it's hard to just kind of get thrown in on a major league level, play for a few games, a stretch of maybe a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden either get sat back down or become more of a bench player, and then you just kind of have your role reduced. Versus where you get a guy like Gio Urshela, right? Where he was kind of written off, right? Like Cleveland let him go, he was done over there, like they didn't think much of him, and all of a sudden he comes to the Yankees. Obviously, always had a glove, but now all of a sudden he starts hitting and he's batting 300 plus. And he came out of nowhere just because he got into the right fit. He got an everyday role in third base and was able to say, look, you know what? I had the talent that was there. And this is the guy that they were saying I was going to be, right? So do I think Clint Frazier could be that? Yeah, he could. He could emerge and be this year's Gio Urshela, let's say. I don't know, but they brought in Gardner probably for depth and leadership. They still need that veteran presence. I mean, if you look around the team, you have like DJ LeMahieu. Outside of that, there's not many veteran guys. I mean, yeah, you want to call Aaron Judge a veteran, but he's not really. He's been in the league for a few seasons, but you can't really say he's a veteran at this point, like a seasoned veteran of that sense. Yes, he's got postseason experience. Yes, he's been in the league for a few seasons. Yes, they're sort of building him to be the next captain, but he's not there quite yet, or else he'd be wearing that C, right? So like, they're close. You got a lot of guys close. So just having that veteran presence, like a CC that was in on the team last year, just having that sort of there, it makes a difference just to have these guys in the clubhouse because they know how to keep the young guys, sort of calm and relaxed and more focused. And you need that. So that's why I think they brought back Gardner. Plus, he's a scrappy dude. He hustles. He still can hit a little bit. Look, there's nobody that in these clutch situations that you want up there at times that you want that relief pitcher to be worked because he'll work in that bat. We know this, right? I could sit there and all of a sudden 15 pitches go by and it's still like a 2-2 count, right? It was something ridiculous like that. So, he's got that kind of capability where he can wear down pitches, brings that true veteran presence. And he's been with the organization the longest, right? Pretty much. So, like you need that kind of element as well, kind of on a team, especially like the Yankees.
Definitely. And obviously, CC retiring after the 2019 season. Then you got 2020. Obviously, no real veteran presence. I mean, that wasn't necessarily an issue, but obviously, we lost the Rays. And obviously, a lot of people think now, at least MLB.com does, that the Rays are going to be below the Red Sox. And I don't really believe that because they came out with the projection standings on their social media page and they had like Orioles last. They had Rays, Red Sox. Like the Red Sox just lost Benintendi. So I don't know where people are getting this thing from. Oh, the Red Sox are going to be good. I think it's going to be us. I think it's going to be the Blue Jays. I think it's going to be the Rays because the Blue Jays have a young core that I think is very underrated across the league. And I think the Yankees do have to pay attention to that because they kicked our ass a couple of times last year.
Oh yeah.
That what was that one game where the bullpen gave up 10 runs in one inning? Adam Ottavino.
Yep.
So obviously that is a team for Yankee fans to watch and not totally get, we lost the Blue Jays, they're one of the worst teams. No, they're building a core and they're going to be trying to kick our ass. I'm going to try to be kick their ass, in the same division. So I don't think that's, something to go under the radar. Kind of relating to that as well, just in a little bit of a sense. What do you think of these new MLB rules that have been implemented since 2020? The expanded playoffs. I don't know if that's happening this year. The 7-inning doubleheader. Was the other one, the runner on second base rule, the expanded DH. What do you think of those rules? Because I have sort of a mindset on that one. And I was born in 2003, so people could associate me with a Generation Z. But I honestly think also to note this year, and spring training is going to be boring this year because we're only facing 5 teams. And, you could say, travel restrictions, whatnot, but the Yankees are going out west this year, something they didn't do last year, other than to face the Rays at Petco Park. They're facing the A's, they're facing the Angels, they're facing how many other teams in the AL West. So you can't necessarily make that argument. Yeah, spring training, but at the same time, it's going to be boring. So I want to pick your brain a little bit on those new MLB rules that at least Rob Manfred is trying to implement.
Yeah, listen, dude, they served the purpose for the whole COVID thing, right? Because they were trying to cram in as many games as they could in such a short period of time. So it made a lot of sense because you were doing a lot of these double headers and all this kind of shit. Outside of that, no, I hated it. That 7-inning thing was absolute trash to me. I felt like I was watching a little league game where it's like, oh, top of the 7th inning, the game's over now. Like, wait, what? Like, dude, this is just ridiculous, man. Like, no, like that to me was just pathetic. I hated that rule. The universal DH, though, you know what? I've always grown up being a Yankee fan, so I was an American League guy. So as long as I've been around, they've always had a DH. I didn't know the league before that. So to me, it's just sort of it's good because it extends guys' careers. You have guys like an Albert Pujols that could just bat, right? Jim Tomei, some of these really good dudes that could hit. They could still hit and contribute to a team, and they're able to do it. I get the whole sort of old school defensive side of it where you got to plan for the pitcher to come up and you want to pinch hit for him and all this kind of shit. But I thought the universal DH was actually a really good move. That was one of the ones I was like kind of a fan of. But like, man, those 7-inning doubleheader things are fucking trash. And then extra innings, you're gonna start a runner on second again. It's like Bush League, Little League shit, man. Like, dude, starting a runner on second base, you didn't even do that in high school, let alone fucking in the major leagues. Like, what? I don't understand like how you're speeding the game up and what you're saving there. Like, these guys have been used to playing 162 games, and all of a sudden we have this COVID thing, and now all of a sudden these guys can't play 162 game season. Like, things are normal. I get it. You might get nervous that you have to plan for a few, cases where there's gonna be COVID and a couple of games might get shut down and you might miss a couple of games here and there. That's no different than there being a really rainy baseball season, right? I mean, in years past, there's been tons of seasons where there was a ton of rain and it was rain out after rain out after rain out, and they got through it. Like all of a sudden now we're going around this thing, which is now going into year 2 of this whole COVID epidemic, and you're not prepared for it. I mean, the NFL was successful in moving a few things around. NHL was very successful. I mean, even though they played in that bubble, but they've been successful so far with this, as well as the NBA. I mean, we're kind of moving past it. You're getting these vaccines, all these things are coming into play where why the hell do we need to keep these stupid like things in place that nobody likes? I mean, I don't know about you, but I hate it, those two things, man.
I do as well. And, I'm no fan of runner on second, no fan of 7-inning doubleheaders. I honestly think, and one other rule I missed on, but it'll come into my head at some point. But I don't think that I want to be blunt here, and I'm going to be. I think that MLB found a perfect time during COVID to experiment with new rules. I think at some point MLB knew, we got to start putting these rules in. 2020 was a perfect, kind of situation. They're trying, in my opinion at least, to cater to the younger crowd because a lot of people complain, oh, baseball is too long, oh, the games are too long. You know what? Just watch the game. It's an American pastime for a reason. And that's what MLB is trying to do. They're trying to cater to the young crowd in a very bad way, in my opinion, with the 7 inning doubleheader and then the runner on second rule. That's robotic. That makes no sense at all. And even though we hate MLB umpires, robotic strike zones will be a part of this, in the next couple of years. Which, what if there's a glitch and a first pitch down the middle is a ball? What are you going to do in that situation? So I don't think MLB is being smart with this. I don't think, Rob Manfred's doing a good job in that situation. And I really hate the fact that he cut so many minor league teams. I mean, that just does a detrimental thing to the sport and so many small communities as well. Because obviously, us being Yankee fans, this is a team in Staten Island. Was now we could say that they closed down and everything. And one of my friends who's a podcaster said, you know what, I worked there, and just a flip flopping around just to save a couple of extra bucks. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. You're destroying the local communities, whether it's going to be in a small city, a big city, or maybe even a small countryside. Those fans are very passionate about their minor league teams. Oh, have you seen the Rail Riders? Oh, have you seen the Staten Island Yankees recently? These guys are passionate about their teams, whether it be a small baseball team, an independent league, or whatever. That's something that the community bonds on. And MLB just took that away because they want the billionaires to save money. I know you probably, just thinking off, I would say guessing, you probably hated that as well.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely did. I mean, look, you're right. It definitely it sucks in a way because we don't see it as much as like Pennsylvania would, right? You go out in the Scranton, right? Like there's not much out there, Wilkesboro. There's just not, right? But yet you had that AAA team out there, and that drew a huge crowd for the Yankees. You there's other cities around the country that don't have big market. You take like Columbus, Ohio, right? When the Yankees were there for years, um like these little towns, that's what they get. Like that summertime comes around, and man, like that city's like sort of jumping in a sense where like that's the bread and butter. They get some of these young guys. Sometimes like some of the veteran players will get hurt and they'll rehab a game or two there. So oh man, we get to see this big time player in our backyard. Aaron Judge is coming back and he's going to play 2 games there, right? You take all that out of there. I mean, granted, he wasn't going to do that on something like the Staten Island Yankees. It's more Division One, but they had a cool little thing going on between them and the Cyclones, right? So like even for like local things, you could take your kids there, right? I have friends that were saying that kind of stuff where, oh, I go there for like a third of the price of going to Yankee Stadium or going to City Field, and the kids are young, they don't know any better, right? It's just baseball to them, right? So you take that element out of it, where look, shit, you could have went to Coney Island, grabbed a hot dog, and saw the Staten Island Yankees play the Cyclones. Fuck it, for like cheap too, right? Like those kind of things suck that's not around anymore, because that's how you build the fans, right? These kids remembering experiences like that as a young kid going to the stadium and seeing these type of things where there's a lot more going on, and they're giving away souvenirs and they're throwing things into the stands, and you have all these additional attractions that these minor league teams have. You take that element out of there. So, now the fan base starts to go elsewhere. The kids don't want to play baseball. They don't remember going to a baseball game. They start looking at soccer or football or basketball or one of these other sports, because that's where this is sort of built from. That's what kind of built like the whole, from the ground up type of thing, where, they would go as a kid and remember seeing that shit with their parents or their father or whatever. And you take that element away from it. That's something that's sort of overlooked. You want to speed up the game. You want to have different features and all that kind of shit. The reality is this: look, anybody that's like sort of in their, late teens, early 20s, you want to go have a good time, you go to the game. All right. Until the playoffs come. Then you can go to a couple bars and you watch the game in a bar, because that shit's fun too. But you go to the game, man. You experience it. You don't necessarily even have to get a great seat, man. Go sit out on the bleachers and just have some fun, man. Drink a beer, have a hot dog, whatever the hell you want to do, and just bullshit out there. It becomes like a hangout. And listen, the last few years, what they did to Yankee Stadium and the way they rebuilt that whole bleachers, man, that shit is cool out there. There's a lot of times we just go just to hang out there. I won't even go to my seats. I'll sit in my seats for like the first couple innings, and then before you know it, I'm drinking a beer in the outfield, just hanging out, like watching a Friday night game outside, and the game's live in front of me. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind if you ever say that the game's dull or slow or something like that.
Definitely. And I'm going to bring in my own example for this situation. So, obviously, with the COVID thing, and this relates, of course, to what we're talking about. So, now, obviously, New York Penn League is gone. Staten Island is not even a team anymore. and they moved Brooklyn Cyclones up to the Double A kind of division, Double A squad, whatever you want to call it. And the thing is that for my school, we used to have the green and white games because green and white is our uniform. It's the colors of our school. So green and white. Every year we would have a green and white game. The varsity team would play against JV team. They would mix up the teams and we would play against each other. And I did that back in 2019. I think it was in June. And we would do that on the Cyclones field. And that was my first year of moving to Brooklyn, getting to know the atmosphere. And I actually played on MCU Park turf. It was really cool. But unfortunately, this year, obviously COVID last year, so you didn't have to, no season was played. And you look at this year and it it presents a obstacle for us if we're going to do any green and white games, because that's what the coach said he wanted to do. He said, listen, we may not have a dinner because the capacity may not be what we want it to be, but we at least want to get a green and white game in. Now the problem is with them moving up to Double A and you having more games, more than a short season, low A team, that might become an obstacle depending on the schedule. So now we're thinking other options like Staten Island or somewhere else. That's something, again, that Major League Baseball and a lot of people think, oh, you're just getting rid of minor league teams. No, you're removing that from the communities. And that's unfortunately the issue. And it has touched me and a couple other teammates in that same subject.
Yeah, no, definitely. I could see that, it's true. And they don't, they look at the dollar value more so than anything else. And that's what literally just comes into its numbers versus what it does for a community and how it changes everything around that community.
And definitely, and catering to the millennium or the millennials of this era is not a good way to really, I mean, I'm not saying you have to cater the old folks and, just have go back to baseball and on radios and stuff like that, but catering to, uh, the younger generation in terms of making new rules just to benefit them. I mean, this is not even, to be honest with you, it's not even about COVID anymore. They found a space to put in the rules, and that's what it's going to be like in the future. And unfortunately, I want to become a broadcaster. That's why I started this thing. Another thing that COVID impacted is, the way things are set up. And a couple of radio hosts mentioned this. And also with the MLB, let's just say teams this season, meaning last season, 2020, if you had your broadcaster, let's just say broadcaster for the Yankees, Michael Kay, they always stayed at Yankee Stadium. If the Yankees, for say, went out to I don't know, went out to Flushing to play the Mets, they would stay in their home booth. And unfortunately, billionaires, owners around the league will say, okay, that saves us money, so we don't have to travel anymore. You know how many people would love to travel around the country just to get the scenery and stuff like that while their team that they broadcast for is in town? I mean, you're taking away from that as well. And a lot of people don't think it that way, but no, it is about the dollar. That is pretty much wrapping up the end of the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast. Jules, thanks for coming on. You guys can check him out on Twitter.
Appreciate it.
Giants Brawl. Also, he has two other guys that he does a podcast with, as he mentioned earlier. New podcast out on Wednesday, you said?
Yes, yeah, Wednesday, definitely. Wednesdays we have it come out. It'll be on Apple, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. And then we've even been posting a little bit like unedited one on YouTube just for shits and giggles, just for the hell of it. We throw it up there once in a while too, just in case you want to get a look at us and see what we actually look like when we're doing it.
Definitely, if you're tired of all the beat writer geekiness and all the, just the generic content, these guys are really entertaining. I'm not gonna lie, the first episode I was hooked on was the one about, I think the title was like some goldfish last just a week, just like some fake ass Giant fans, and that's where I got hooked. I said, okay, these guys are the real deal, much more than other people, and it is the truth because a lot of Giant fans do last a week and then they're not Giant fans anymore, whether they're bandwagons or not. But definitely check them out. Jules, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for
Anytime.
having me, man. Appreciate it.
And talk to you later. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you on Friday.